The cafe was quiet that evening, a small island of warmth in the cold, neon-lit city. The rain tapped gently against the windows, washing the streets outside in silver light. Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread mingled with soft music, and for most customers, it was a place to escape from the sharp edges of the world. Alara moved through the tables with quiet grace. Her apron was dusted with flour, her hair tied back neatly, and her eyes alert to every detail. She had learned long ago that the world could be unkind, and she had built herself a quiet fortress of work, focus, and distance. That night, the door opened with a soft jingle, and a gust of wind carried the scent of rain and something darker. A man stepped inside, tall, dressed sharply with an air of danger that seemed to bend the light around him. He was Dominic. Dominic was known in the city, whispered about in fearful tones. A man of influence, a man of power, a man whose smile could charm and whose anger could destroy. And yet tonight, he simply walked to the counter, his eyes scanning the cafe as if nothing could surprise him. Alara glanced up, meeting his gaze. She saw the danger, yes, but she also saw something else. The quiet loneliness in the sharp lines of his face, the hint of something human behind the power. She made a choice. She looked away. Dominic noticed. A faint curve of a smile touched his lips. Most people, when they saw him, faltered, bent, or fawned. But not her. She ignored him completely. "Coffee." "Black," he said, his voice low and smooth, almost a growl. Alara nodded, filling his cup without a word. She placed it in front of him, her hands steady. He watched her carefully as she moved back to other tables, serving the quiet patrons with practiced kindness. There was something unusual about her calm, about the way she did not flinch under his gaze. He liked it. Minutes passed. Dominic sipped his coffee, watching her silently. Every so often he would glance at her, noting how she moved, how she interacted with others. And yet she never once looked directly at him unless necessary. The other patrons seemed oblivious to him. Some lowered their heads, pretending to read, as if hoping he would not notice them. But Alara's gaze remained steady on her work, never bending to his reputation. Dominic decided to test her. He walked slowly toward her, his presence filling the small space around her. She looked up briefly, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second before returning to her task. "You seem very busy tonight," he said, leaning casually on the counter. Alara paused, then smiled politely. "It's a quiet night, actually," she said. "Just a few regulars." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "You call this quiet?" He gestured to the nearly empty cafe. "I expected more. Excitement for someone like me," she shrugged lightly. "Not everyone wants excitement. Some people just want coffee." The simplicity of her words, the honesty, and the lack of fear intrigued him. He realized she was not playing a game, not seeking favor, not trying to impress. She was herself, and that was rare. As the night continued, Dominic stayed watching. He did not speak much, simply observing her. He noticed the way she greeted each customer, the small gestures of kindness, the careful attention to detail. It was as if she carried a quiet light, invisible to most, but impossible to ignore once noticed. Alara, for her part, tried to ignore him. She reminded herself that this man was dangerous, someone whose world was far different from hers. She kept her distance, her professional mask firmly in place. But even so, she felt a strange tension whenever he was near, a pull she could not name. Around midnight, the cafe grew emptier. Only a few customers lingered, nursing their last drinks. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining. Dominic remained, his eyes never leaving her as she cleared tables and wiped counters. Finally, he spoke again. "Why do you ignore me?" His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a curiosity that bordered on fascination. Alara paused, a rag in her hand. She considered her answer carefully. "Because I serve everyone the same way," she said simply. "No special treatment." Dominic tilted his head, studying her. "And yet, most people would fear me. Most would bend," she shrugged again, looking down at her work. "I don't fear people. I only fear losing myself." The words hung in the air. Dominic felt a spark of something unfamiliar. Admiration, curiosity, maybe even longing. He realized that this small, quiet woman had a courage he had rarely encountered, and he wanted to know more. Suddenly, the door slammed open with force. A shadowed figure stumbled in, their voice angry, loud, and dangerous. Dominic's sharp gaze immediately caught the tension in the room. He stood, the calm aura of danger radiating from him like a storm. "Who is causing trouble?" he demanded, his voice low and commanding. The figure sneered at him, not recognizing who he was. "This is none of your business!" Dominic moved closer, and in one smooth motion the threat was neutralized. The cafe fell silent. Ilara's heart pounded, but she remained in place, stunned by the sudden violence that had almost erupted. When the figure fled, Dominic turned to her. His eyes softened, a hint of something almost tender in his gaze. He walked slowly toward her and knelt slightly, as if to meet her without intimidation. "You were brave," he said quietly. "You did not run. You protected them." Ilara felt a strange warmth in his words. For the first time, she saw not the dangerous Mafia boss, but a man capable of admiration, a man who recognized courage when he saw it. Dominic straightened, his voice dropping to a whisper that only she could hear. "She serves only me now." Ilara froze. The words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. She did not know how to respond. Fear, shock, and something deeper stirred inside her, a feeling she could not name. He walked away slowly, sitting back at his table, eyes fixed on her like a silent guardian. She worked, her hands trembling slightly, but her face remained calm. She had never experienced a tension like this, a tension that was intense, powerful, and yet oddly protective. As the night wore on, the city outside darkened further. Rain began again, gentle and cold, pattering against the windows. The neon lights shimmered on the wet streets, painting the world in shades of mystery. Inside, Ilara continued her work, but her thoughts kept drifting to Dominic, to his words and to the strange, inexplicable pull she felt toward him. She wondered what it would mean, what it would feel like, to exist in his world, to be part of his life. But she pushed the thought away, reminding herself that his world was not hers, and that she needed to stay safe. Stay independent, stay herself. Dominic, for his part, remained at the table, watching her silently. He saw every motion, every small act of care, every flicker of emotion she tried to hide, and he felt something he had never felt before. A desire not to control her, but to protect her, to know her, to belong to her in some way that words could not describe. The night ended quietly. The last few customers left, the doors closed, and the cafe was silent, except for the soft hum of the lights and the gentle patter of rain outside. Ilara wiped the counter one last time, her thoughts still tangled with the events of the evening. Dominic stood, placing a single note on the table before leaving. It read simply, "Tomorrow, same time. I will be here." Ilara stared at it for a long moment. Her heart beat faster, her mind a whirl of questions and emotions. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing. Her quiet, ordinary life had been touched by someone extraordinary. And she could not ignore the feeling that everything was about to change. As the door closed behind Dominic, a shiver ran down her spine, not of fear but of anticipation. She had faced the shadows of the night, but the shadow he left behind felt different, heavy with promise, heavy with danger, heavy with something she could not yet name, but would soon have to confront. The next evening, the cafe smelled of fresh coffee and pastries again, but tonight felt different. The air carried a tension that was almost invisible, yet impossible to ignore. Ilara arranged the tables, her hands steady, but her mind restless. She glanced at the door every few minutes, half expecting Dominic to appear. When he finally did, he stepped inside with his usual calm, dangerous presence. Yet tonight there was a softness in his eyes, a trace of a smile that only she could see. Ilara took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay focused. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady but polite. Dominic nodded slightly. He did not sit immediately. instead leaning against the counter, watching her move with an intensity that made her heart race. "You were brave last night," he said quietly. "Not many would have stood their ground." Elara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "I just did what was right," she replied, not meeting his gaze directly. He smiled faintly, sensing her hesitation. "And that is why I am interested in you. Not fear, not obedience. Honesty." The words lingered in the air, heavy and warm, making her feel exposed yet strangely safe. She was unused to being noticed for who she truly was, rather than how she looked or what she could do for someone. The night went on quietly at first. Customers came and went, unaware of the silent storm between the two of them. Elara worked, her hands moving automatically, but her thoughts drifted to Dominic. He, too, seemed lost in thought, observing her quietly. Occasionally their eyes would meet, and a spark would pass between them, unspoken, powerful, and entirely new. Then a commotion outside caught their attention. A group of masked men moved through the alley beside the cafe, clearly looking for trouble. Dominic's gaze sharpened immediately, a subtle shift in his posture that suggested danger was near. Elara felt a familiar flicker of fear, but she stayed at her station. She had learned last night that running was not always the answer. Sometimes, courage meant standing your ground. The men burst into the cafe suddenly, shouting and brandishing objects. Customers screamed and ducked under tables. Elara froze for a moment, her heart pounding. Then she saw a small child hiding near the counter, eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, she rushed forward and scooped the child into her arms, shielding them from harm. Her mind raced, but her actions were certain. She would not let anyone else be hurt. Dominic reacted instantly. In a few calm, precise movements, he neutralized the threat. The men fled before anyone was seriously hurt. The cafe fell silent, except for the heavy breathing of its occupants. Dominic turned to Elara, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "You are reckless," he said quietly, almost a whisper. "But brave." Elara looked up at him, her eyes wide. "I couldn't just let them hurt someone." Her voice trembled slightly, but her resolve was clear. Dominic studied her for a long moment. Then he reached forward, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. The touch was firm, yet gentle, protective without being overbearing. "You have strength," he said, "and a heart that does not bend to fear. I want to keep you safe." Alara's heart raced. "Safe? From what?" she asked. "From the world," he replied simply, his voice low. "From the dangers you do not yet see. From everything that could harm you." The words were both comforting and frightening. She realized he spoke not only of the city streets or the criminals outside, but also of the world he lived in, the world of power, influence, and danger. For the first time, she understood the depth of his offer. To accept it would mean entering his world, a world she had never imagined she could navigate. Yet, she also felt a pull, a strange curiosity and trust that she could not explain. Days passed, and Dominic continued to visit the cafe. Their conversations remained few, their interactions brief, yet every glance and gesture carried weight. Elara began to notice the subtle changes in him, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the small, almost imperceptible smiles he reserved only for her. She, too, felt a change within herself. The fear she had carried for years began to lift slightly, replaced by something new. A sense of connection, a quiet hope, and a growing awareness that she could be more than just a small, unnoticed part of the world. One evening, Dominic invited her to step outside with him. The streets were empty, wet with rain, and the neon lights reflected like jewels on the pavement. He did not speak at first, simply walking beside her, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Finally, he stopped and turned to her. "Elara," he said softly, "I am not like other men. I cannot offer you a simple life, but I can offer you truth, loyalty, and protection." She looked at him, her heart beating fast. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. He smiled faintly. "Then I will respect your choice." But know this, I do not let go easily, and I will not leave you behind. The honesty in his words, the raw vulnerability hidden beneath the surface, struck her. She had never met anyone like him before. Someone so powerful, yet capable of such genuine feeling. The city's quiet moments were rare, but in those fleeting instants, Ilara and Dominic's bond grew. They discovered small truths about each other. Dominic revealed his past, the loneliness that came with power, the cost of loyalty and fear. Ilara shared fragments of her own life, loss, resilience, and the small joys that kept her going. Their connection was not dramatic or loud, but subtle and profound. Each glance, each word, each small gesture carried meaning, and slowly, a trust began to form, fragile yet real. But peace was always temporary in Dominic's world. One evening, news arrived that a rival gang planned to strike at one of his associates. The threat was serious, and it would not wait. Dominic's expression darkened. "They will not hesitate to harm the innocent to get to me," he said quietly. "And I cannot allow that." Ilara felt a surge of fear. "Then we must be careful," she said. We can't let anyone get hurt." He nodded, his eyes softening as they met hers. "You are right. And that is why I need you to trust me completely." Ilara hesitated, then nodded. She did not fully understand the dangers of his world, but she trusted him. And in that trust, she found courage she did not know she had. The night of the confrontation arrived. Dominic's men moved swiftly, securing the area while he planned each step with precision. Ilara stayed nearby, hidden in the shadows, her heart pounding with every movement. When the rival gang finally appeared, Dominic acted quickly. The clash was swift and decisive. Dominic's strength and strategy were unmatched, and he ensured that no innocent bystanders were harmed. Ilara watched in awe and fear, realizing the full scope of his power and responsibility. And yet, even in the midst of danger, he never lost sight of her. His eyes always found hers, reassuring her, guiding her, silently promising her safety. After the danger passed, Dominic returned to her side. His expression was softer now, almost weary. "You were brave tonight," he said. "And you remained calm when everything around you was chaos." Ilara felt a mix of pride and relief. I only did what I had to," she said softly. Dominic shook his head, smiling faintly. "No, you did more than that. You stood with courage and you did not falter. That is rare. That is extraordinary." Her heart raced at his words. She had never been called extraordinary before, and the warmth that spread through her chest was almost overwhelming. He reached out, taking her hand gently in his. The touch was firm, steady, and filled with unspoken promise. "Ilara," he whispered, "if you stay, you will belong to me. Not as a servant, not as someone beneath me, but as someone I protect, care for, and need. Only me." The weight of his words pressed upon her, but she did not pull away. She felt the truth in them, the sincerity, and the depth of feeling he could not easily express. Her lips parted slightly, her voice barely a whisper. "And if I choose to stay?" Dominic's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability showing. "Then we face the world together. Danger, power, chaos, and whatever else comes. But we face it side by side." For the first time, Ilara understood that her life, once quiet and ordinary, had changed forever. She would not only witness the shadows of the world Dominic commanded, she would step into them, not as a bystander, but as someone who mattered to him. As the neon lights flickered on the wet streets, their hands still clasped, Ilara felt a sense of certainty she had never known. She did not know what the future held, but she knew one thing. She was ready to face it with him. The rain began to fall gently again, washing the city in silver, but inside that quiet space, a new light had begun to shine, one born of trust, courage, and the delicate beginnings of love.